I'm David Bannock of the Philosophy Department, and this year is director of the Conversatio program here at St. Anselm College. I'm with some members of Theatre KAPOW, Matt Cahoon and Professor Peter Josephson of the Political Science Department here at St. Anselm. Theatre KAPOW was a theater company that was started by some four St. Anselm alumni, and has been doing serious theater in New Hampshire for how many years has it been?
We're heading into our 8th season. Yes.
And last year you were awarded the New Hampshire's Best Professional Theater Troupe by the New Hampshire.
Yeah, 2013, Best of New Hampshire for Contemporary Theater from the editors in New Hampshire Magazine. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And this past year, our productions won Best Actress, Best Actor, Best Director, and Best Productions.
The New Hampshire Theater Awards.
It's been a good year. So we're very fortunate to have them performing Seamus Heaney's adaptation of Sophocles' Antigone as part of the Conversatio program this year. How did you guys get started being interested in Greek theater? I've seen a number of your other productions of Aeschylus as well, and it was sort of wowed by them.
Mm-hmm. Well, my wife is Carrie is class of 1998, graduated as a classics major from St. Anselm, and has always had this kind of dual interest in the classics and in theater, and in the many places that those overlap. So we've worked in the Greeks. In fact, we did a whole season of Greek theater, and we've worked with Greek plays or plays adapted, based on Greek plays for a number of years. Coming to the Antigone was interesting because we had decided on the burial at Thebes literally about 24 hours before Professor Ann Norton, emailed us and asked if we would do a version of the Antigone. So it was a very synchronistic moment for us where we thought, oh my goodness, we want to do this version of Antigone, and here we're being approached by St. A's to do a version of Antigone, so it felt like it was the right thing to do.
For me, I think, as I think about it, apart from reading, is this true? I had been in a production of Lysistrata some years ago, which was a Greek comedy. But my first experience acting in a Greek tragedy, I think, was Agamemnon, which we did in 2011. And there, we were working with a great adaptation that really brought home the way in which there's a sort of plot, and the plot also serves as a metaphor for deeper human problems. Mm-hmm. And I think Antigone works the same way, and Burial at Thebes works the same way. Yeah. So a couple of years ago when Matt said, let's do it, I was excited to get back to that kind of theater, that less naturalistic, more elemental theater experience.
And did you immediately center on Seamus Heaney's production? I think that was in 2004 it first came out. And
we did, yeah. We have in our house a about 7-foot tall bookcase that's filled with play scripts, and both the Cura Troy and the Burial at Thebes are two of them that we've looked at for years, and we came to the idea of Burial at Thebes. One of the major reasons, to be honest, to explore the Antigone was that we were just a couple months removed from the Boston Marathon bombings, and there was a lot of news about Tamerlan Zumaya, who had died and wasn't being buried. They couldn't find somebody to accept the body, and so he was actually. A woman from Virginia drove up to Boston and accepted the body, and he's buried now in Virginia. But so often when we explore the classics, we find that these themes that were, this is a 2,500-year-old play, and here in 2013 at the time, we're having some of those same conversations. And so I think we always look for relevance when we're working with the classics, and you don't usually have to look very hard. We're constantly finding places. Peter mentioned the Agamemnon. We presented the Agamemnon. It opened on September 11th, 2011, 10-year anniversary of the attacks in New York and in D.C. And the first line of the Agamemnon is 10 years since. And so we really had to grapple with, we're doing this play on the 10-year anniversary, and the first line of the show is 10 years since. And we're finding time and again when we approach the classics that kind of relevance, that overlap with contemporary events. And that's one thing that we always want modern audiences to understand, is that we're not doing them as time capsule pieces. We're doing them because they still resonate.
I remember seeing a note by Seamus Heaney comparing Creon in the Antigone to George W. Bush. Does that make it harder as portraying Creon to sort of get out some of the more nuanced features of Creon's character that were part of the original play?
You know, that's interesting. Because we had talked about that, and there are one or two lines in the script that also seem to make that sort of difference. In playing Creon, playing Creon was a really unusual experience for me, because usually there's my acting life and there's my political science life, and now the two have collided. And so, as a political scientist, I read Creon in a particular way, and then as an actor, I have to read Creon in a particular way, and figuring out how those things fit together can be sort of complicated. But anytime you have a role like that, sort of heavy, the first thing to look for really is the goodness, and because otherwise it's an unbelievable cartoon. In Creon's mind, he is doing absolutely what he has to do, and in some respects, by the end of the play, we're really seeing the tragedy of Creon, of a man who comes in to power at the end of a civil war in his city, and who feels deeply the need to bind that city together and to make it one nation again. And that means distinguishing friends from enemies. And who believes that he can do that. That's his arrogance, his hubris. And by the end of the play, he realizes that he's gone horribly wrong, and he has gone horribly wrong. But in order to sort of arc out that story, you really have to start with Creon as a man who is dedicated to his country and who loves his country more than he loves his family, which is a really interesting starting place. He's a very patriotic person. And one of the questions of the play is what happens to a very patriotic person confronted either with family responsibilities or with responsibilities to the divine, responsibilities that transcend country. I'm really excited to be getting back to it this year because I want to go back to that starting point and reevaluate it and re-explore it and find it again.
In the course of this semester, the theme that we're using this as an introduction to is, of course, the relationship between the community, the individual, and the divine. Of course, the Antigone is perfect for that because you have Creon versus Antigone and her relationship, to her personal relationship to Haemon and to her brothers, and of course the divine injunction to bury the dead. But there are good reasons for Creon's role as well. I remember the wonderful Ode on Man, that many wonders, terrible wonders walk the world, and they develop. They go through all the wonderful technical things that human beings can do, but the main techne that human beings have is the community that protects us from the harsh necessity of the elements. Never share my thoughts, anyone who would go against the community and put us in danger. In many ways, that shows the problematic of what the community does for the individual to protect it from the harsh necessity of the physical world.
I think that's what makes it a really great story, is that there isn't an easily identifiable villain. That our sympathies ought to be with Creon and ought to be with Antigone. And in some way, the greatness of Greek tragedy is that it helps us see that confrontation, that paradox, and see it in ourselves and understand for ourselves, well, yeah, I do have this in me, and I've got that in me too. I have divided loyalties, and what am I going to do about that?
Yeah, we often talk about the piece as a courtroom drama because really Antigone makes her case and Creon makes his case, and I think a shared kind of combination of the audience in the chorus kind of have to act as jurors in this world, you know. And it's not, as Peter is saying, it's not an open and shut case. There really is some struggle there on both sides. And so that is absolutely what makes the play really exciting to look at, because you do feel like, you know, Antigone comes out and tells you this, and you say, yes, 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 and then Creon counters, and you go, yes, 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 you know, and then you kind of have to work that out in your own mind.
And in all Greek drama, there's an undercurrent about the basic human condition, that human beings have limits, and they're constrained by necessity. Whenever they overcome those limits, they fall into tragedy. And that has a very modern resonance as well. So,
I think in our times, we often, this isn't new, we often try to persuade ourselves that we don't face those limits, that with the right technology we can solve any problem, and this play is a great reminder that that isn't true.
So many of the features of the production of the play that are part of the original production, the ones and some of the innovations that Theatre KAPOW has introduced, sort of reveal the way in which the Greek mindset is somewhat foreign from the modern mindset. How did you come upon some of the ways in which you use the chorus and music and some of the other features of this production of Burial of Thebes?
Sure. Well, we knew very early on we wanted to do it as a mask piece for a couple reasons. One, to be in keeping with the way it would have been originally produced, but also because it allows a flexibility for us. One of the great comments we got after the first time we did the show was how many people are in the cast, because mask allows actors to play a number of different roles. And so basically everybody, with the exception of Creon, who's in the cast, is also a member of the chorus, and they have to through a little bit of stage magic, sometimes very quickly change roles from one to the other.
And of course, that's true to the original. There were just one or two actors who use masks to play all the roles.
Yeah.
So we're doing that kind of that theater calisthenics of rushing actors around and changing them very quickly. And we in that season we were looking a lot at incorporating live music, and so it came to pass that. I had just come back from working in Italy, and we were incorporating live music into a lot of shows there, and I thought we really needed Greek music in the piece. And so we took Heaney's odes, and we found a way to incorporate in some traditional Greek folk music. Some of the songs that we use are centuries old. And we found a really wonderful musician named Sandy Theodora, who lives just outside Boston, and she's real. I don't know how to describe her influence on the show because it's so huge. Yeah. But we worked with her on identifying the songs. She's a wonderful singer, but also a great instrumentalist. And then we decided to set those Thebes into. We try not to say dance, but it's into movement sequences for the actors, who are basically we took Heaney's words and distilled them down into some basic gestural sequences, and we're using that to go along with the music and kind of bridge from one scene to the other. So even though I said that as a bridge, they're not really transitional moments. They're still very much a part of the plot and a mover for what's going on stage, and really a time for that chorus and that audience to think about the arguments they've just heard and to have that experience of the deliberator, I think. So it works really well, and those are probably the major. We're incorporating some new stuff this year. We have this puppet sitting next to me that we had built in Prague. And we're working on a little bit of puppetry this year to further flesh out the show.
And how did you come upon this mask? I love the mask that they use for the chorus.
This mask, we have a number of these. Theatre KAPOW has a full set of masks, which actually we had made for us when we did the Agamemnon. But they are. This is actually Tiresias's mask. We do something a little bit different with the masks, which is rather than using the character masks as the characters, we use the character masks as the chorus. So the the chorus is fully masked, and then the chorus members can step out of the chorus, remove their masks, and play their parts. So we had them made for us and painted for us back in 2011. We've used them since for any time we've done Greek stuff, but certainly in Thebes. So.
Well, both the choral mass and the puppet, they all have sort of the effect of producing something, a feeling that's sort of uncanny or unusual, something that breaks through sort of the normal mode of experience that we have. And in some sense, Antigone is a play about what things human beings can't bear to look at. You know, the dead have to be buried. Antigone has to be hidden away in a tomb. So, you know, is it on purpose that you introduced the effects that the mass and the puppet and the music have on a modern audience?
I think, yes. I think it's pretty purposeful that... and it's not just with Thebes, it's really with all of our work, that we want the audience to have an intimate experience with our work. Most of our shows, as you know, the audience is much closer than they are for Thebes even. But we want them to have that pretty atypical theater experience. You know, we want to touch people in ways that maybe they're not getting from seeing a big musical or something. And I think more importantly, we really want to raise questions, and so we have a lot of fun with talkbacks and answering questions about things like, why did you incorporate a puppet, or why are you using mask? And for me, and Peter maybe answered this slightly different, image is so important, and so the images that we use and we can generate by using mask or puppetry or shadow puppetry like we did with Macbeth is so it adds a depth and a richness to the storytelling that I really like to use.
I wouldn't say anything all that different. I mean, you know, I think for audiences today, seeing a piece of live theater or a movie or television, which I think is what most people are used to watching, what you see is something that's fairly realistic and something that presents to you all of the visual data you need. And it becomes pretty easy to sit back in a chair with some popcorn and just sort of let the cathode rays do their work. And what we want is something that requires a little more activity from an audience. And the mask, the music, the puppet, all make demands on an audience's imagination. When an audience comes to see one of our shows, they're making a kind of commitment that they're going to be contributing. They're going to be making judgment about Antigone in that sort of trial idea. But we want to work with movement, gesture, sound, images that invite the imagination of the audience, that bring forth images in the audience.
So could you talk a little bit about how the setting and the imagery of the play?
Sure. You know, one of the things we frequently think about with the Greeks is where to set it. I suppose even if you're doing Shakespeare, you wonder kind of about time period. And this is not a play that we set in the period in which it was written. We looked primarily, we were looking at communities kind of after war. And so a lot of the imagery for the show actually comes from research that we did into the bombings of Dresden. And so the show has a look of certainly a community after wartime, but also the actors are dressed, while fairly neutral, they're dressed in costumes that may certainly more closely resemble 1940s Germany than 2,500 years ago in Greece. So that's a pretty purposeful choice that we've made in terms of dress and scenery. And the other thing we've done is kind of a neutrality versus some color choices. Our royals, if you were, are always in blues, and our chorus is always in grays. You see very little color in the show, with the exception, and Tiresias is a little bit different. Tiresias is all in white as the seer. But all of those decisions were based on this initial research that we did, again, looking at kind of Dresden. And one of the amazing things in looking at photos of Dresden is that it's amazing devastation, but it seems like more often than not, kind of public war monuments weren't touched. And so you'll see this beautiful war monument in the midst of just tremendous rubble and heartache. So that's kind of the look we were going for with the show.
It's one of the most common questions we get about the sweeping of the ashes.
Yeah. So the stage, this is an interesting little stage tidbit, but the stage is covered in dirt. It's rubberized dirt that we cover the stage in, and the show starts with one of the chorus members kind of literally picking through the debris post-battle and pulling out. He pulls out, it's hard to see from stage, but he pulls out a number of trinkets that are linked specifically to family. So he'll pull out a picture of family members, or he'll pull out keys to the house and things like that, are all part of, kind of intertwined into the world. The one major change that we did with costumes, which people always ask about, is that the actors are never, none of the actors are in shoes. So the show is performed barefoot, and I'll let Peter give you the rationale.
Only that, I would say this, that bothers some audience members, which has surprised me. Like, why would they care? It might bother us, but it shouldn't bother them. But the reason we do it, again, is because we want that image of real contact with the earth. We don't want a leather sole, or a plastic sole, or a rubber sole coming between us and the ground. We want, it's part of the immediacy of the experience for us to just be in bare feet walking in the rubble.
It reinforces the idea that the human tragedy is something that we have to separate ourselves from, or the human condition.
Yes, right.
And we had a great talk back last year, and one of the audience members said, "Oh, I really thought that what you were trying to say was that at our core we're all humans." And I thought, yes, that's what
That's pretty
so,
yeah.
so sometimes those choices you make for some reason end up really resonating with somebody in a different way than we expected.
Well, you see these characters dressed in suits and so on and so forth, and then they're barefoot, and it makes you do this. It makes you look more closely and think about what it means to be wearing a suit, and what that really covers, and what it doesn't, and whether clothes make the man, or whether the man is actually really there.
Not only do the audience need to be engaged, but the actors need to be engaged, and by removing the shoe in a kind of interesting but very understandable way, they have to pay more attention to their step. They have to watch where they walk. We've got a stage that's covered in rubble, and so they have to really be in the moment all the time. And I kind of like, as a director, to throw those little challenges to the actor that aren't going to be imaginary. They're going to literally have to walk through rubble, and what does that mean? And that removing the shoe really does allow us to do that in a pretty an easy but a very real way.